Ventura County, California has the legend of the Char Man, a horribly burned figure that stalks the wooded roadways of the Ojai Valley. There are several stories which claim to explain his origin, but the most common version goes back to a wildfire that scorched the region back in 1948. It's said that a man and his son lived in a remote cabin in the hills south of Ojai. As the fire approached, they became trapped, and the cabin was consumed. When rescuers arrived sometime later, they found the father's remains, charred flesh stripped from the bones, strung up from the remains of a tree. The son was nowhere to be found. Years later, stories would emerge of a human figure wandering just off the forest roads to the south of town. They say the Char Man appears covered in bandages and is accompanied by a foul, burnt smell. What little skin remains exposed is said to be cracked and blackened. His experience left him a deranged monster of a person, immediately and intensely hostile to all who were unfortunate enough to catch a glimpse of him, his only utterances being pained grunting as he gives chase to those who cross his path. It's said that passing motorists have had their cars pelted with rocks, or been chased by a figure that emerged suddenly from the tree line. According to some sources, the Char Man has even been known to stand by the side of the road as if trying to hitchhike, only for drivers to speed off as they get closer and are able to make out his hideous form. One of the more popular aspects of the legend states that if you exit your car at the bridge on Creek Road and call out into the woods, the Char Man will appear from out of the trees and attack you. As with any legend, there are alternative suggestions as to the Char Man's origins. In one version, he was a motorist driving down Creek Road sometime in the 50s and wrecked near the bridge. He was badly burned, but managed to drag himself out of the car and into the woods. A variant of the story states that he was accompanied by his wife, who called out for help, but died from her wounds before he could free himself. In this version, one must stand on the bridge and call for help in order to prompt an encounter. A more plausible version from the 60s posits that the Char Man isn't actually burned at all, but a man with a serious case of skin cancer which left him disfigured. Not wanting to be seen in this state, he'd walk his dog at night, with the legends rising from those who had only briefly seen him in the dark. If this account were to be true, it wouldn't be the first time. If we look at it from this perspective, there occurs a parallel between the Char Man and the legend and reality of the Green Man. The stories went that he was a horribly deformed lunatic who lived in an abandoned house, or possibly a ghost who haunted his stretch of rural Pennsylvania highway at night. The Green Man was so named for the infected color of the opened wound that had once been his nose. Raymond Robinson was severely disfigured after an electrical accident at age 8, losing his eyes, nose, right arm, and one of his ears. As an adult, he rarely left his home during the day, but would go for walks along a quiet stretch of highway at night. The legends arose from the accounts of those who had seen him. Aside from his appearance, Robinson was, by all accounts, a perfectly normal and even amiable person, who was happy to speak to anyone who pushed past their fear and approached him. Sadly, his friendliness was not always reciprocated. Thanks to his legendary status, locals would sometimes seek him out during his walks, and he was violently attacked on several occasions. With this in mind, it becomes much more plausible that the Char Man may have at least some basis in reality. While the story is originally told of a deranged, burned hermit driven mad from trauma and isolation, the passage of time has necessitated more supernatural explanations. With his supposed origin taking place the better part of a century ago, the Char Man should surely have died by now, or at least slowed down in old age. Some newer versions of the legend state that he died at some point and has continued to patrol the roads as a ghost. Or alternatively, that he actually did die in the fire, and has haunted the valley as an enraged spirit from the very first reports. According to the Ventura County Historical Museum, there were no deaths in the 1948 fire. Even still, were I to wander down Creek Road for myself, I think I'd find that to be of little comfort. And even though the Char Man is most likely nothing but a story, I'd nevertheless keep my eyes on the tree line, smelling the air for a hint of that foul, burnt smell.